right. Let's get Charles on. Hey, Charles.
Hey, John.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good, good. Just situating myself. Love Instagram so much.
Isn't it the best?
Thanks for joining me tonight. I figure we give folks a couple minutes or a couple seconds to join before we jump in. But hopefully you're having a good weekend.
Yes, I am. Been working away and relaxing.
That's good. I'm not sure what relaxing means anymore, but
Well, I guess to me, it's doing something that has nothing to do with working,
mm, I
right?
like
'Cause,
that.
yeah, yeah. But see, I relax while I work, so I mean, it's not like work is work. I enjoy it. I enjoy
That's the thing, right? Like if I'm packing up art, if I get relaxation from that doesn't count as work, right?
yeah, yeah, I mean, if you're enjoying it, is it really work?
Sure. Yeah. We're already getting onto our
Hmm.
long conversations about tangents. I'll get started. We'll get started here and let folks trickle in, and I'm sure people will watch the live or the video of this as well later at their leisure. I'll be posting this on YouTube too. Just to introduce myself for folks that may not know who I am, my name is Sean Watkins. I'm the owner of Athenaeum Comic Art. We represent some of the art of some of the best cartoonists in the business. Tonight we'll be talking with my friend and artist, Charles Glaubitz. Charles is an artist and a cartoonist. We'll talk more about how he defines himself a little bit later on in this chat. The primarily the art that we sell is from his 3 volume set of star seeds. We diving into that as well. Um, Charles has some artwork currently up in the Comic-Con Museum in San Diego in a show called Border Blitz Artistas del Comic de Tijuana. And yeah, welcome, Charles. Thanks for chatting with me tonight.
Uh, Happy to be here. We've been planning this for a while now, and I guess finally the Astros aligned.
Yeah, it's probably my fault mostly with just busy schedule, but excited to be chatting with you. Before we dive into kind of your background and star seeds, I wanted to give you a moment to talk about the art exhibit up at the Comic-Con Museum. I've seen some pictures; it looks fantastic, but I thought I'd give you some space to talk about it and encourage folks to go see it in person.
Yeah, at the Comic-Con Museum at Balboa Park in San Diego, May 8th, I think it was, or May 9th, May 8th, May 9th, they opened a show about comic art from artists from Baja California, which coincides with World Design Capital, which is a designation given to a city, country, state, something, uh, about their cultural, not so much cultural design, I guess, or design thinking, how they solve problems with design. And it's about socioeconomic, political, cultural uh, um, ways of designing with design skills, I guess. And it's this year's Tijuana, San Diego, and what the things they've been doing is, or one of the things that that's been happening is they've been having these presentations, and they've been working with trying to get cross, I guess, border artists over there and artists over there over here, as well as designers and architects and whatnot. So I was invited to kind of co-curate the show to try to find other artists who wanted to participate. let me let the puppers out because they're not.
That's all right. It's a live show. Anything could happen. Any exciting dog
So
or child could run in at any point. Go ahead. Sorry.
so they invited me to kind of co-create. I sent out a call on Facebook, and a lot of people responded. A lot of people did not respond. And two other artists, aside from myself, were chosen. One is Alejandra Yepes. She's from Ensenada, Baja California, and she's like the youngest one of the group of three. And she does kind of like young adult comics. And we have Urbano Mata, who does kind of like a slice of life, Bukowski-esque comics about living in Tijuana, and myself included. And I think the work that's on in the museum is work that's, well, I guess I'll go back to the beginning. I started doing in 2006 and 2007, I had this idea of doing a mythology through art exhibitions, and that each art exhibition or each series would be kind of like a chapter of this evolving story, and that people would be intrigued enough to go to the art shows, to the art exhibitions, to see the show and to see how the story develops. And I did that from 2006 to 2012, 13 maybe. And I ended up with a lot of story and a lot of artwork that inspires the comic book. And so the show that's up at the San Diego Comic-Con is the art of Star Seeds, I think I'm calling it. It's like the art that inspired the comic book. Because after doing that for 5 or 6 years, nobody knew what the hell I was doing. So I decided to make a linear comic book, and that's where we get the Star Seeds from.
I don't understand. I started
Oh my
doing in
God.
2006 and 2007 doing I.
It's so weird. Siri all of a sudden just turned on.
It's our overlords are listening in on us. That's awesome. Like I said, there's some beautiful pictures of the show up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on. It's called Border Blitz, and love to hear your thoughts about how your work intersects with borders. I think you live at the border. You were mixed as well. One parent was Mexican, one was German American. Lots of borders, metaphorical borders and physical borders, but would love to hear your thoughts on how that kind of interplays with the work that you do, if it does.
Well, I think it does in a very like a metaphorical parallel, but it's kind of odd. Because I was thinking, I read the questions beforehand and thinking, oh my God, I grew up being mixed in Mexico, and one of the first things that came to my head is I never experienced any kind of racism. I was Mexican, right? My father was American, but I was still Mexican. And I think that how it relates to borders is how uh, how to make them invisible, right? So I think I grew up in a family where my father and my mother spoken in their own language, and I spoke to my father in his language, my mother in her language, and I guess the idea of something that would separate, whether it would be communication as simple as speaking languages, everything was very superfluous. So I think going through growing up in Mexico and actually having a hard time trying to identify who I was, basically. I kind of figured out that I was kind of like this mixed hybrid kind of thing, as we all are if we really dig into it. And when I graduated, I came back to Southern California because I went to school in Northern California. I kind of found the Tijuana San Diego border more interesting than before. Other than I'm an American citizen and I'm a Mexican citizen, so I never had, I guess, the border was never a physical obstacle for me. I could always cross freely. So that's one of the things I think that I as a young age I'm very privileged that. But looking at the border and looking how culture more so on this side is very superfluous in crossing into San Diego to work, to study, to shopping or this or that, right? People from Tijuana never missed a beat in going into a different country, as opposed to when Americans do come down into Tijuana or Mexico. It's to them it's a different type of cultural shock, and I think uh, the idea of border on being on this side, because I chose to be on this side, not to be on the American. I think I definitely believe that as screwed up as Mexico is as a third world country, it's much more freer than the United States. People here are free to see the border not as something that limits you. It's something that more per se could be something that obstructs you, but it's more of an obstruction. So I think how I developed a way of seeing it is that it's neither. It's not an obstruction, nor is it a limit, but it's something more like this physical thing that is invisible to ideas. Ideas don't stop it from conflict from here to there or there to over here. So I think borders in my work are seen as things to go beyond, or things to solve, or things that the only actual true borders is not the physical ones we create, but the ones we create inside ourselves or how we perceive, right? So then that's the things with starseeds. It's not so much of the outer, but it's more about the inner, these inner things. And I think it's inspired by this great book by Joseph Campbell. It's called The Inner Reaches of Outer Space. So the more you can go inside of yourself, the more you can go outside of yourself. And I think that, to me, that just eliminates the idea of borders. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it's not, I've never really thought about it. I don't think it is like a thing I've been able to, thanks to my privilege and I guess the way of how I think, be able to solve it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know we've talked a little bit about in the past privately about when I was in school studying borders, in particular, whenever I have conversations like this, I think about Gloria Anzaldua's work on the border. But it sounds like, and it's really interesting that you had more of a porous kind of experience of border culture, right? You were able to move freely between the two. And in some ways, it seems like that has allowed you to look at, to question borders, and to complicate them more than folks that are kind of more stuck, right? Both physically, but also metaphorically as well.
I think what you said just made me think that when you're on the border, you can clearly see both sides, and I think that's a perspective that being on the border gives you. You're neither here nor there, and you can observe what is the positive or the negative of either side. So a border doesn't. It's not a limit. It becomes like something that amplifies perspectives just because you're on an edge of either or, not belonging and not feeling that you belong in either place, which is it's a lot of work, mental work, spiritual work to figure out, because we want to belong, but I think the people who belong on borders, they figured out that where it is that they are, that's their home.
Well, and perhaps the sort of movement through borders, between borders, is part of that process as well, right? I mean, one of the things I think about is sort of how we're often trapped in binary thinking. And I think what's interesting about star seeds is that there's both some binaries, but also kind of breaking those apart in a lot of ways. Um, and I think that there's something beautiful about kind of that breakdown of those ideas, the ways that we're stuck in some of those concepts that force us, that limit how we experience the world around us. Which is why I love what your work does. It kind of challenges some of those notions. But before we dive too deep into some of these ideas, I'd love, you've talked a little bit about it, about your sort of growth as an artist, but did you always think that you were going to become a full-time artist? Was that something that you were really interested as a kid? Was it something that has changed and adapted over time? I know obviously you do fine art and comic books as well, and they kind of intermingle. But I'd love to hear more about kind of your journey in the art world.
Well, I grew up in Rosarito Beach, which is like a half an hour drive south from the border, past Tijuana, in between Tijuana and Ensenada. And it was a beautiful, sunny beach town, but it seemed that it was so hard to get out of there. Uh, so to me, growing up there, my feeling was that I was stuck in this town that was really hard to get out because there was nothing. There was no. I guess back then there was no computers, no art. The idea of making art or making a living was very romantic, and the artists who lived in the town did very romantic art. Um, and I was really dumb, so I was an idiot. I had not discovered anything and not explored anything, and I had no real growth until I had luckily a friend of mine was going to the same kind of things I was going, which is like around 18 years old. It's like, this place fucking sucks. You can't grow here, blah blah blah. What do you want to do? Well, let's go to find a job. And he could also cross the border. Let's find a job in San Diego, make some dollars, and start going to school. And he was a sculptor. Ruben Davila, he was a really good sculptor. And we took a couple of art classes. We went a semester. He stopped going after one semester, and then the second semester I discovered graphic design and discovered computers, and I was like, oh, that sounds like the future. Something I might want to get into, and maybe something that leads me away from where I grew up, because I felt stuck at the moment. And that made me change my whole worldview, made me grow, made me begin to cross the border. I lived in Rosarito, so I would take a taxi in Rosarito that would take an hour to get to Tijuana, and I would take a bus to the border, and then from the border I would take a trolley to downtown San Diego to San Diego City College. So it would take me 2 hours to get to school and 2 hours to get back home. And usually I had like around $5 or $10 that I saved up from work, or that I would steal from my mom, or somebody, or she would loan me. And sometimes I wouldn't have anything to eat, and I would have to wait 2 hours to get back to Rosarito to get home to try, feed myself. So that whole ordeal of just like chasing a way to get out of Rosarito or to find my place or whatnot, has, in a way that, thinking of right now, has a lot to do with the work that I do, which is like always thinking about not so much at myself as it was at that time, but about questioning what are our horizons, where are we going to, and basically the things with the work that I've been doing, which is the fine art career. It started early around 2000s, and it was mostly the first type of art I was doing was very political. I was young, and I was very punk, and I was angry at the world, and I was like very non-Americanism, very non-consumption, very anti-capitalism and whatnot. So I kind of created a story of this battle, and I don't know if you've seen the Once Upon a Time in Tijuana comic, which is that is more the way I'm telling that story is more afterwards, so it's less angry, more kind of like magical realism. But it got to a point where that character became, which was the zebra boy, the Niño Burro, became very popular, and people were beginning to identify it with punk idealism or with rebellion. And it got up to a point where somebody offered me some cash, a bunch of cash, to do this painting of that character skiing from a cabin in Lake Tahoe. And this guy's, his cabin was his way of giving the finger to the man. And I'm like, oh my God, that fucking character. If I do that, the fucking character is going to be a fucking sellout. What I did is I did a story and I killed him off. So when I killed him off is I was at a point where I was thinking about what I had done, which was talking about archetypes and mythologies and about social-political systems and whatnot. And then I'm like, well, I had a near-death experience, and that near-death experience made me, instead of looking outwards, to look inwards, and that's where. Meanwhile, I was having a near-death experience, which lasted like a minute. I was, and my conscious was in this void, floating around, and I said to myself, "Shit, there's nothing here. I can make this space my own." So when I got back, when I didn't die, came back, I'm like, I'm gonna make my own gods. I'm gonna create my own gods, and that's where I started creating these kind of abstract, I don't know, things where it's about made out of energy and it's solid, but it could be it has so many different phases, kind of like a Rorschach kind of thing. And they became I was calling them at that time the Eternals. I changed their name just because of copyright, but I was definitely inspired by the idea of Jack Kirby killing off the old gods and then creating new gods. But what if these gods were not, what if these gods were training a new generation of beings to affect change in our reality? And that's where the idea of Starseeds started. And I was doing museum. I've done museum shows. My art has been in museum shows, and it was going fairly well around in the mid 2000s until some important Mexican curator said that illustration was not art, or comic books was not art. And then all the invitations and opportunities that was coming from Mexico City, which is, I guess, the art one of the art meccas here in Tijuana. Tijuana in Mexico. You can relate that to like being invited to New York and to show your work over there. Kind of died down, and I was stuck with. I was just stuck with what I was trying to do. So I kept doing that for a while until even it got to the point where people didn't know what I was doing. With these kind of painted work and whatnot. And that's when I decided to get all that story and make it into a comic book. The art and the story I was telling was inspired by comics. So it's like, well, if that's the inspiration, then that should be like the closest thing I should do. And then I started doing my first comic book. I'm going to pull out that. Give me a minute. So around 2010, I did my first comic. It was called The Criticism. And it's just a, wordless comic, which just pretty much tells the story of, what was that? Tells the story of, how they encounter Crystal Girl. So around this time, 2010, Jaguar, Indigo, another character were already established, but this is where we meet her. And this appears in Starseeds 1. So Starseeds 1 is it's a mesh of this story and another story that I was then working on, which was called The Secret Society. And these were comics or zines that I was publishing, self-publishing myself, trying to figure out how to make comics. And then that was done in an anthology book called Panel to Panel. And then he sent that. He's like, oh, I'm going to send that to American Best Comics. And then it got a notable distinction or whatever it's called. And that made me think, I've been doing art for like 10 years and I'm struggling. And I did a comic and immediately it gets response. So that might be the way. And from there on, which is like around 2012 till now, I've been just making comics and art, and art to inspire the comics, and just going back and forth between painting and inking comic book pages.
So you've been with Starseeds for a long, long time, and I think it's, especially these days, it's rare to see someone spend that amount of time on a story. I mean, there's multiple stories, of course, but what kind of compels you to keep that story going? What about this kind of is that there's so much passion here that you've done 3 pretty lengthy volumes, and it's not complete yet. It's just interesting to see someone who's so dedicated to this world and this space.
Sheer lack of intelligence and self-love, I think. I mean, the story is important to me. I think in a way it's biographical. It reflects my growth as a human being, as a person. And I think from I just have no answer for that. I think it's like a virus. It's in the story's in my mind. It's there 24/7. If I don't get it out, it keeps growing and growing and growing. I keep thinking about it, and I think one way to maybe give it a rest is to tell the story, right? It's, one way to finish the story that's within my mind. It's to finish the story. It's to tell the whole story from beginning to end. And if I would have started the story making comics or telling the story from when I started in 2006, I would have been done by now. Because from 2017, from the first published Starseeds, from last year, there's the 3 volumes have come out within 5 years, 6 years.
Right.
So I think I'm moving faster telling a story in comics that I was doing it art-wise. And I'm enjoying myself more because I can make it more complex and have the opportunity to say something or to say everything that I need to say, as opposed to like a painting is it's one large idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you stare at and you look at, that it can have multiple readings or understanding of it. And I think the comics are kind of made the same kind of way, but to me it's linear, right? It's going from point A to point B. Well, maybe it's going from point A to point D and then skip a couple and then I want to go back to point B and that's how I'm telling the story. But I feel the need to finish the story for whatever reason.
Yeah. And I wonder if you could tell folks a little bit more about star seeds. We have the sort of beginnings of the idea kind of coming out of wanting to create your own gods. And I think one of my questions is about ambiguity as well. So I don't know how much you want to tell folks outside of the experience of reading and kind of grappling with the books themselves, but I'd love to hear you kind of frame it for those that may have not read it yet.
Well, I think I largely influenced by mythologies and the way how mythologies are written and told, and how they have this, I guess, for lack of a better word, double meaning to how and what there is that they're expressing, because it's trying to tell something that is beyond words, or something that is beyond the physicality of existence. Uh, so I tried to do that, but utilizing things of that that I'm interested in, which is alchemy, hermetic ideas, quantum physics. So the way it's written with this language that is based on these concepts from these things that I'm interested in. So I'm using the language or the words to evoke these ideas, to evoke these concepts, and I think it's not a very easily. It's not, how to say this. I keep repeating this. I made a book for people to discover. I made a book. I made the books. I made the books. How to say this? I made the books for people who are initiated. Instead of, and this is something I kind of like. Oh, I'm trying to make a book where I initiated people into this kind of
Mm-hmm.
thinking. But no, I did. I did it how I only know how to do it, which is to be to say what I actually truly mean without trying to jump around the idea. So the stories is something that for me to be uh, written in mythopoetic language, which means it's written in the language of mythology, but at the same time metaphorically and poetic, with the idea that the the readings or the understandings of those ideas would be open to transcendence, which means pretty much that it's not an open and closed book, that every time you go back to reread it or read it, it means something else, because it grows as you grow and you begin to infer different meaning into the metaphorical ideas or concepts that you're reading. And most of the scenes or chapters that happen within the book have to do with initiatory rites of
Mm-hmm.
hermetics or alchemy or magic. And the idea is that as you read the book, you are either consciously or unconsciously um, putting into action these rituals. Um, with the reading of the words, with the reading of the story. Uh, so basically, I tried to. I don't know. I was thinking I was going to make an art book. It's going to be comic. It's going to be art. Uh, and those are the things I was shooting for. I don't know if if that's what I achieved or not, but that's in my head. I guess that's what I was working towards. So Starseed is this cosmic mythology, as the universe is born, ideas are born. As the first stars are born, the first ideas are born. As the first elements that make up the stars, which stars are quarks, they are the first characters. And basically, the first three books is the characters going into this epic battle without them knowing that they're just a battle. It's basically a battle of ideas, a
Mm-hmm.
battle of concepts, and that they themselves are ideas, and then they themselves are um, intangible, but can be made tangible only if when uh, the gods in the story, which is it's just ourselves, believe in them collectively, and they manifest them. And it has something to do with something that I read that these ideas in the book of Enoch, which are called their egregores. Egregore is a physically manifested, materialized entity that is created by a collective thinking, collective belief. And that to me is kind of like a metaphor to how our reality that we've constructed ourselves. It's made of collective beliefs. And those beliefs that have more collectiveness to them, there's more people believing in them, the more real they kind of sort of become, enough for us to engage in war, to defend, to conquer. And this always seems to be towards something negative. We don't seem to take the collective belief to try to do something good. And so these characters kind of at the end of the third starts to kind of realize what they are, and that's the end of the first part of Starseeds. And then within that story, we have the reoccurring two sisters, which are the rainbow twins, Arco and Iris, and they are the ones. Well, this is maybe going into what's going to happen next. They're the ones who are going to materialize the star seeds in our dimension, in our reality.
It's really, I mean, I love your books, and one of my, it's not, maybe it's not a good question, but I sort of, maybe my interpretation sometimes of star seeds is I see bits and pieces of like the real world kind of represented, or themes of kind of, you know, the rise of fascism, this sort of some of binary thinking, I think, imposed through power of some of these characters, and sort of this eternal fight. How much do you see events happening in the real world kind of reflected a bit in your work or in Star Seeds? You know, I think, and I think we may have talked about this offline before, but as a child of myself, of coming out of, you know, September 11th, George W. Bush, War on Terror, the solidification of power through making things binary, right? By making things static, right? A terrorist means this, right? But we're not terrorists, even though we're torturing people, right?
We're not terrorists.
And so
we're terrorizing people.
We're terrorizing people, correct, right? And so as I was reading your books, as I've read your books, I kind of see it through my own lens of looking at the world and being terrified of a fascist state in the United States. We're fairly close to it, I think. But I'd be interested to hear, is there a conscious sort of bringing in of some of those ideas? I mean, I guess some of it's universal anyway, right? This idea of power and folks trying to manipulate us and control us and to maintain their own power. But do you think about that consciously in terms of your own experiences and how they kind of seep into your work?
I think the United States has been a fascist country all the way since post-World War II. I think when they begin to try to control the world in East Asia or in Asia and Latin America, when they began to send out, you know, all the dictators in Latin America, all the Korean War, the Vietnam War, when they figured out, and this is my opinion, but it's kind of backed up by history. they figured out that they could gain more power by destabilizing governments. It kind of changed. I don't say this. Well, let me go back a couple of steps. When you grow up in a country that is somewhat controlled by the United States because we're in their backyard and there's certain things Mexico as a country can't do because it goes against the United States government's wishes. And then you see and you read about history in Latin America, then you realize that the United States has been a fascist country for a while.
Right.
And I think people, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to see it when you are inside the eye of the tornado, I guess, or hurricane. People still believe that we're heading towards fascism. No, I think we're not heading to. We're heading towards the final realization of all the fascist processes from way back when, right? I think all the boomers that are conservative and like alt-right and whatnot, they are sons and daughters of this fascism that started way back when. And I think now it's been trying to be physically manifested in the reality, and just not to be manifested. Sorry, it's already manifested, but for it to be out in the open.
I see.
Yeah, because in the early 2000s, I was a big reader, late 90s, 2000, big reader of Headbusters, WTO, and all the stuff that globalization was trying to do onto the world and did, and how it affected pretty much everybody outside of the United States, more, less inside the United States.
Well, it was being framed as a very positive movement, right? We were breaking down borders. We were allowing, cheaper goods to go back and forth, when the reality was it kind of intensified the United States' ability and Western countries' ability to kind of sap resources more overtly. Sorry, but yeah.
Yeah. So in the story, I am making the total complete relation to how all the philosophical, social, economical, and political systems that we've created for the past, from the beginning up to the present, have become just fascist. There is no government that is not fascist. There's no government that subdues a part of their population forcibly, right? So, yeah, I think the whole world has fallen into fascism. So when we see the characters, the Illuminatis in the story, they don't just represent, they represent all governments. They represent all ideas of fascism. And maybe there are little aspects here and there, and there are large aspects from there over there from other governments, but it also represents a lot of Western ideology, Western thought, which is it's more about the individual and less about the community. So I think it's definitely trying to mirror what I've lived.
Right.
I'm from the 70s. I grew up in the 70s. I was born in the 70s, and I grew up in the 80s. I grew up being worried about the terrorists, worried about the Ayatollah, worried about Beirut, worried about this or that. So, when I talk to my daughters, who are like around, early 20s, it's like the world has always been this screwed up, and it's been screwed up because governments tend to want capitalist fascist governments tend to want to invade other countries to promote the idea of democracy.
Right. Neoliberalism.
So they can have access to their goods, and that's why the world is the way it is. I mean, and I just read something like we go all the way back to like why is there so much stuff in the Middle East happening? And it had something to do with the Algerian War, which inspired Frank Herbert to write Dune, which Dune seems very prophetic now.
Right.
The spice equals to, let me let this pupper in. She's like, let me out, Daddy, let me in. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's
sort of it's
reflection.
all of those things combined. I love how you framed it as it's not just one event, and the ambiguity there, or I don't know, that isn't a good word for it, but we can kind of take our own experiences and apply them to what's happening in your book, but it's really all of it combined, and that this idea of we're coming closer to fascism. The system is fascist, right?
Yeah.
One teacher I had talked about how we often frame problems as, well, that's a racist thing, that's systemic, right? And his point was that the system is built to be racist. The system isn't broken, right? We frame it around being broken. The system was built to be racist, to be fascist, right? And I think what I struggle with some of these ideas is, so we're enlightened now, or sort of the curtain is drawn back, and we can see sort of the societies and sort of what folks in power are doing. What the hell do we do next, right? What do we do about that? And I think it makes me think about how you had mentioned that a lot of your work started as, or sort of, you started as this angry punk kid. And it's interesting now because I would never, in our conversations and sort of interactions, I would never think of you as this sort of like angry artist, right? But how have you kind of come to terms with dealing with a problematic world, isn't even doing it justice, but an unfair, cruel world, and being able to kind of have an outlet where you can play with some of these ideas and have folks kind of be inspired by your work. But how do you sort of deal with those, the revelation, and then the what next question? My one of my college professors used to say the "so what" question, right? So we've done it, now we know about it. What's next? It's a hard question, I know, but be curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think the art, the stories, and the art that I make, I think art actually should be subversive to whatever it is is the common denominator, the thinking of what is, should be subversive to that, because art should always push things to grow beyond from what is established. And I think one of the things is that with Starseeds is, to me, it's totally subversive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm attempting to be, or trying to be, subversive to social, political, economic, and religious ideas. Because in the way before I get to the what next, the way I see the world is, it's enslaved by the stories we've written from 10,000, 15, 20,000 years ago. We can't get beyond these old stories, and these old stories have made the world decrepit, because the old stories are created by old ideas of what the mystery of our world or reality is. An example would be, and it's something I really like that Joseph Campbell says, is that living and breathing mythology has to be concurrent with science, with present knowledge of present science. And I don't think neither of the dominating religious point of views, social, political, and cultural point of views are concurrent with what we know about the universe or the cosmos. So if we take to what Campbell says and we look at what we've created as a society, it's dead. So in terms our growth, our being able to say going to head towards that horizon, it's like a dead vision. So I think the attempt is in Starseeds is to create, and this, and we talked about this, to create that this moment where, and it's going to make, I'm going to make a movie, make it related to a movie, to Il Postino, the postman, where he begins to read some poems of Pablo Neruda, and he decides to go to war as a revolutionary. He never comes back, but it changes the story of that country's destiny, right? It liberates itself from its dictator. And if something that is an attempt to Starseeds is what comes next is hopefully it inspires people to question the stories we tell ourselves, right? And maybe empower themselves to be able to tell their own stories. I mean, I imagine a world of what if everybody makes up their own gods? What if everybody makes up their own religions, right? Would you know, and what if people, you know, I think the world would be better. I think the world would be so damn weird that it would be magical, right? I think it would break away from all the ideas that we have about how we're enslaved to these stories, we're enslaved to language, we're enslaved to these ways of thinking, and we can't even dream beyond those ideas anymore. So I think Starseeds is that it's an attempt to dream beyond the stories that we've told ourselves.
It's so fascinating. Not only are we limited by these stories, but the natural conclusion of them is bad, right? Like we're. I had never really thought of it in that way, but not only are we kind of unable to break free, but we're doomed, right? The natural conclusion of all of these things is the end, right? And thinking of it in terms of where are those sites of resistance? There are obviously lots of them, but you know, dreaming, right? Pushing experiences to their limits, you know, forcing yourself to deal with people who are different than you, right? Like all of these ideas help you sort of break out of those stories that confine us. Starseeds is an example of that. It's really interesting. Like the only way for us to survive both, maybe I'm extrapolating too far, but maybe the only way for us to survive both physically and mentally is to break away from these ancient tales, right? Whether that be, you know, patriarchy, whether that's capitalism. In order for us to survive, we need to become free.
We need to become free
Yeah,
from the stories and I might be wrong. I mean,
sure.
but the way I mean, no, but I may be wrong because the how I see it to a solution is for everybody is, you know, is to tell a new story, or maybe for everybody to tell their own, you know, to I don't know. I think about it like it's a magical ritualistic act to, you know, to defeat or to destroy or to kill the old gods, and from the remnants what is good from them, right? Pick out what actually is, and then put those together to create something new, right? And maybe this something new is not a you know, in essence looks like us, but it's something more abstract that generates and creates more pondering the mystery of fucking life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who said this. Somebody said this. Like maybe the reason we're so fucked up is because we don't know why we're here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think the reason we're here is to just ponder the mystery of it. We don't have to have an answer, right?
Right. Well, and it's okay to not have the answer, and the pursuit of, I don't know, knowledge. Or I've always been impressed with people that are okay with knowing that they won't know everything, right? Right? That the answers aren't always there, and I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to think about. Um, we're coming up on an hour. I knew we would kind of get through some deep thoughts here together. And I love this idea of the so what is going off and creating your own stories as a metaphor that obviously can mean a lot of different things, right? Literally create your own story, but go out there and challenge the sort of dominant narratives, these dominant stories, and make your own space. And I think there's a lot of complications to that with issues of privilege and power and things like that. But at the end of the day, we can break free of from the ways in which we've been taught to think. People can't take that away from us. And your texts like yours kind of help people see experiences in different ways. I think that's really special, and I love that you're doing this work. And there is an end to Starseeds. Is there an end? Is there an end planned out?
There's an end planned out to Starseeds. Above everything that Starseeds is, it's a myth. The most powerful myth is our creation myths, which equates to destruction, just because it needs to be destroyed in order to create something. But I think the whole process of the story will end with the beginning of something much more beautiful than what it started with. And the end is it's epic. So I can think it comes out of the way I see it, it's epic. The stories that I'm working on right now, it's called Into the Noosphere. The two sisters and two sister Archimedes and Hadron go into the noosphere, which is this theorized sphere of thought. First it was geosphere, biosphere, stratosphere, and the noosphere is the nuclear sphere of human thought. And that's where maybe the ancient ideas of the Akashic records and or the Carl Jung's collective unconscious comes from. And I'm having these characters go into that space to try to come down as ideas to inspire their manifestation in this reality in order to change or confront the impending darkness that we've created in our society and stories and how we think. And that's the epic final, is this confrontation between, well, first they got to get there, so that's part of the story. And then the confrontation with this black darkness, that's this human collective fear and hate that has manifested.
Well, I'm excited to read it. I have thoughts. I feel like it would take us a few hours to kind of deal with them, but I see the end being a beginning is interesting, and I always like the symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, and this idea of oftentimes when Western folks come in to look at other people's folk tales and mythologies, we interpret the end as the end of all things, the sort of Christian sense of the end, rather than us looking at these eras or these periods of time that change and adapt and into something else, right? And I'm really excited to see what that means in Starseed's world. So yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. You may be able to hear my children yelling as they are coming into the house, but I know we've talked about, or we've alluded to the evils of fascism and sort of late stage capitalism, and so it may be ironic that we are going to talk about selling art, but I think in my experience as an art rep, and a lot of the reason why I started Athenaeum was that an acknowledgement, even if I'm not explicit, but an acknowledgement of capitalism being really shitty in terms of supporting art, particularly in where the country that I live in. And in my mind, Athenaeum is subversive in that it challenges some of those ideas of artists needing to survive off of only one means. And while it sucks, and I think folks should be able to survive as an artist and thrive, because you all are bringing magic into our lives and helping us think about the world, it's not quite the reality. And so I've been very proud of the work that the Athenaeum has done in order to help support folks, even in a very small way. And we could get into like, are we just perpetuating the system and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, artists need money to pay their bills. And if I can help folks get some money to pay their bills, I feel like, that's what I can do as my site of resistance. But yeah, that being said, I don't know if you have thoughts about any of that. I'll hold up some art that we have from Charles.
I've heard the argument of that you're perpetuating capitalism. It's not once if I can barter like that piece for like a week's groceries, I would.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have any problem with that. Who would take me up on that? That's the question.
Right.
So the system is geared towards exchange of capital, and there's no way escaping that until we change it. These pieces are done for a book that I haven't finished, which was Who's Who, and it was going to be a self-published book of who are these characters and explain basically in poetic verse who they are. That's the Lizard King. And they were done for a show at the Fantagraphics Gallery a couple of years back. That's Jaguar.
It's gorgeous.
Can you yeah, the Jaguar is, can you like let's see, okay. Yeah. See here, like a more realistic, and I tried to give him ethnicity or yeah, I guess the word. So he's reflects native indigenous people here in Mexico, and Crystal is I don't know what would be not Indo-European, but European, I guess.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't really thought of them as they're the and ethnicities of your characters. But I think it shows more in these paintings, I think, than in the inked pages.
And like indigo is Asian, Indo-Asian.
Oh, interesting. I'd love to hear you talk about.
And that's the Illuminati.
There's some when I when I see this, I think of a certain symbol in the United States in terms of the costume. But
Right.
is that sort of conscious? I mean, these symbols are in a variety of spaces as well.
Right.
But
Well, it alludes to to the Ku Klux Klan,
mhm,
obviously. Uh, it alludes to secret societies. It alludes to hangmen. It alludes
right,
to this idea of power. Um, so like the hood. Well, I had done a research about what headgear and whatnot. Uh, so basically, the first headgears of the first sacerdotes. How do you say that in English? First mediators between gods to the gods uh, were supposed to be phallic.
mhm,
And so here it's the headgear is fully erect, but when you see them, they're kind of in the comics. They're kind of like uh,
yeah,
kind of
a little
limp,
flaccid at the top.
kind of limp. So at the same time, I'm kind of like giving a nod, nod, wink, wink, uh, calling the fascist limp dicks,
Mhm.
basically.
I did not get that.
These are
I'm happy.
like,
I really love it. Really love that.
and this is the Archon,
Mm.
the who the true God, the secret true king of the world. But but the Archon is not. He's no ruler is good, so he's like the evil ruler.
Yeah, sure, a couple more here.
That's Renato, the spirit guide.
Mm.
Renato means rebirth. Who is reborn, and
Do
he's
you
a
think we all need spirit guides? Do you think that they're kind of crucial to enlightenment? Is needing someone to help us achieve? Well, I'm putting words into your mouth, but
well.
uh,
I think that there's people, persons who have lived, right, that have experience and wisdom to be shared, um, which in our society, we're not so much, but in our like in Western society, when you're old, you're kind of like decrepit and you're useless. And we send our old people to like old people's homes because we don't want to listen to them.
right.
And I think not to say that old people have a lot of wisdom or not, but they do because they have experienced life and are at a different stage of their life. So I think the spirit guide, the wisdom, the shaman, the teacher has always been present in all mythologies,
Hmm.
stories. Uh, so in my story, he's there also. He's the one who helps guide this. Basically, he helps guide the story. Right? He remembers remembers everybody where we're supposed to be headed.
I want to show just a couple of these drawings, and then we can wrap it up here.
Yeah. That's from one of comics that I did. I was doing self-publishing. It was called Black Darkness, and it was how Indigo succumbed to his injuries after the Crystal Sigil. And these appear now in Starseeds 2. And they're pen and ink.
So this
And
is a kind of early version.
yeah, this is 2010, I think.
2010 is what it says on the back. Yeah. You'll show one more here.
Yeah. So most of these images appear in the comic, and this is where I was doing gallery. I did a gallery show called uh, Simplicity, Complexity, and there was a bunch of paintings uh, and these narrative images telling this short story of.
Very cool. Well, all these are now live on the website. So if you love Charles's work or want to support him, they're all available now, and hopefully they go off to some fabulous homes and get displayed. The colors are just amazing, especially on those paintings. So I don't know if it does it justice on my crappy phone screen, but well, thank you so much, Charles, for chatting with me. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to talk about, or any last thoughts before I let you go?
I guess one thing would be give Starseeds a chance. Uh, I think you will enjoy the reading. I think it will be something that you will read 4, 5, 6 pages a couple of days, and then get back to it, and then think about what you've read, and it's made to be read in that kind of sense of form, because it reminded me a lot when I read William Joyce, and how hard it was to read him, but at the same time it was so rewarding, because it made me think about so much of what's around me. So that's one thing. The other thing is, make sure that the story you're living is yours, and it's not something that somebody wrote for you. And it's like that your beliefs are not that they're yours. That hopefully that the beliefs that you have are instructions from ancient wisdom that gives you the capacity to decipher what are your ideas, and what is their ideas that the dominant whatever it is, dominant idea or story is telling you. And that's probably is the hardest part, because it's kind of like it's like that, the mechanisms or the tools that I have to decipher these stories came from reading other stories, right? But the stories that I read, or the people that I read, gave me tools to decipher what is real and what is not real, in my experience. And that's the thing is that's okay. That's the second. The third thing is, once you get there, what the tools that you are given, what they will ask you to is to die and to be reborn in life, right? So when your all beliefs die, right, it's like a metaphor of death. And then when you're reborn on the other side, then you're open up to see or to have a different perspective. And it's kind of like a reboot, I guess, a spiritual, mental reboot. And having that ego death is the hardest thing that could happen, because, and it has to do, ego death with change, transformation, because the hardest thing to do is to change. Because why would I change if who I've been, and it's all I've known, right, for the past, say, 50 years? Why would that, not so much why, but that idea or concept of that ego, right, is afraid for change, because it will cease to exist. And that's the hardest thing to do. But that, once you confront that and you go towards that that ordeal, when you come out on the other side, you'll say, wow, that was actually a piece of cake. Wow, actually, I feel like all the baggage that I was carrying is gone. Wow, I see things differently. Wow, I now enjoy different things that I didn't enjoy or that I ignored. Or, wow, now that's being said about me, or about my society, or about my beliefs, or about my heritage, or nationality, or patriotism, or gender, or sexuality, or this or that, doesn't really matter. It doesn't really affect me, right? Because I know I've gone through the process as an ordeal to know who I am. And that process is, if everybody went to that process, then I think the whole world would change.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting as well. My interpretation is that there are all these little deaths, not to confuse it with the other little deaths, but the sense of it's an ongoing process, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're dying and being reborn, constantly, and it's really about engaging in that process and being open to that process that gets us closer to enlightenment, and that we may never reach it completely, but that's okay. The part of being alive is challenging these spaces and overcoming those confinements. And I wanted to say to your point about giving star seeds a chance, I think what's interesting and kind of thinking of it in terms of like Kirby-esque, as an influence, Kirby as an influence, the pictures are just so pretty too, right? Like I think the subversion sometimes is in itself looking at some of these beautiful images and wanting to dive deeper. So at the most superficial level, you can read your books and say, wow, these geometric shapes are so gorgeous and these designs are so gorgeous, but that's kind of what gets you in. And then it destroys your mind in a good way otherwise. The other thing I wanted to, this is an idea that you may want to consider. I don't know if you were a fan of Rage Against the Machine,
Wow.
but when I was a kid, one of the neat things when I was listening to them in college, they had a website that listed all of the books that influenced them, and I remember picking and choosing kind of the books to dig into, and I think those of us who are inquisitive, that's how we kind of look at the back of the book, or we look at the influences of those books. And you may have this already, but it'd be so fascinating to see a list of kind of either the books or the pieces of art that influence you as a tool, right? I think art doesn't always need to explain itself, but having some of the same tools that brought you where that kind of helped usher you along the journey can be so powerful, particularly I was going to say to young people, but really anybody, because I've had many moments of sort of epiphany throughout my life where I'm like, oh shit, how I've thought about everything is wrong, and now I need to reframe it. But, I think that'd be really neat if you ever had an opportunity to share some of that.
I think that's I was just thinking, oh, that's awesome. I could just Joseph Campbell, Philip K. Dick. I'm gonna brain fart. Okay. Alan Moore. There was this really good editorial publishing house in the early 2000s called Disinfo.
Yeah,
Uh,
I missed Disinfo.
I
I love that
missed
one.
too. Robert Anston Wilson. Most of everybody that were on this info who wrote essays, PJ or Porridge, and I'm just like, okay, Timothy Leary, who else?
David Slatkin asked earlier if you had read any Carlos Castaneda.
Yeah, I did. I have. I think. Was he an influence? I read the first book. I found the first book really interesting. How it spoke about the awakening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when I was going through the process of trying to figure out maybe what I was going through, or that I needed help, that was an exterior help or a guide, going back to this story kind of helped me, because it doesn't define what the awakening is. It just defines the experience of having one.
Right.
Right. and that's what I liked about that, because then I can take what experiences I've been having, and I can, figure it out by myself, not having somebody tell me what it is. And I think that's one of the big things to me, is that when you have an experience, you can have a guide or you can have a story that helps you figure it out, but it's up to you to choose if that is for you or not. Somebody said, yeah, Moebius, as artist-wise, Moebius, Kirby, Jodorowsky, and it's just, it's endless. Jim Henson, I think Renato is inspired by Kermit the Frog.
Right.
Starseeds is inspired by the rainbow connection of Kermit the Frog. The whole story basically is my interpretation, I guess you could say, of the rainbow connection, which basically thing is like it talks about the beauty and magic and mystery of something that doesn't really do anything, but once you believe it, then that's how magic happens, and how the world is made up of believers, the lovers, and me. Tra la 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 la. Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorite songs.
I love that. We're having this sort of philosophical conversation about your book and all these Campbellites and Jungians and blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, you're using the tools around you, your experiences, to kind of reach us in a variety of ways. And those symbols in your book are not just sort of these, or maybe they are. Maybe Kermit is a universal symbol of a guide. Kermit is a guide in a lot of ways. But I love that you don't limit yourself just to high art. I don't like using those phrases, but that's a part of us limiting ourselves, is that we give so much credence to certain types of art and not others. And maybe that is subversive as well, of using, pop culture artifacts to help tell the story. And those artifacts are built out of stories that have been told for eons, and sort of you're utilizing them to tell your own story. That's really fascinating, and I love this conversation.
Well, and Renato, the way he's dressed like the sorcerer or a priest from Alejandro Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain.
Okay.
Right. So it's like these two guides combined together, but at the same time, the first time he appears on top of a mushroom. Like, it's like reinforcing these ideas of what is a guide, or at the same time he's a frog, right? And his mother is Bufa,
right?
The sun god,
right?
Goddess, sun goddess, and Bufa, the Bufa frog, is where you get DMT. So it's like all these connections just keep going and going, and so it's like every picture to me, going back to this is going to, like, you could probably say that a lot of the panels in the comic book have like these interpretations that go deeper than what you're seeing, kind of like in a painting. So
right.
That's how my thinking came towards comics, or towards the comics, and let's go for the image. I have it right here. Right. So, right, and then you have these little kodamas, which are from Miyazaki, forest spirits. So he's on top of a mushroom, wearing the Jodorowsky phallic hat, and he's a frog. And I believe we should all lick the frog.
I feel like we need like the annotated Starseeds. They did that for Sandman. Neil Gaiman's The Sandman.
And they did it for the Invisibles, Grant Morrison's Invisibles.
Yeah.
Invisibles is another. It's that also influenced starseeds.
Interesting. Huh.
Where Grant Morrison puts everything that his interest and what he's experienced inside the story to make these
Right.
meta starseeds kind of tries to trot along the same ways. And
I never would have made that connection myself, but I can see it now.
And
interesting.
One of the ideas, and this is something I pitched to Fantagraphics, was we should do an annotated. Get somebody who's really, two people are really smart, and then sit down and try to figure out what it is that it's being said within the story.
I would buy it, and I'd like to think that there are enough people that are interested in that sort of thing. But hopefully, folks will watch this conversation and they'll write into Fantagraphics and demand that they get the annotated starseeds.
That would be something really rad, and that would be like another of those things that I dreamt that would be manifested. They'd be like, "Hey, that's cool." Nobody knows, because basically what I read through the reviews of Starseeds, it's like a majority do not know what the hell is going on with the story, right?
Yeah.
A majority, and it's like half. It's split right down the middle. Half don't get it, and half do. And I'm so happy about the half that does, and not that I'm worried about the half that doesn't. But I think that they would, if they understood how. No, you can't do nothing about it. They don't understand. They don't get it. They don't understand. It's like I was saying, maybe they understood what is saying. Maybe they would find that they would understand what they mean to it. But then that's just me, my ego, trying to say, no, I want to sell out. I want to sell out the whole print run. I want to be a New York Times bestseller, but that's not in my hands.
You never know. You never know. And I think the half that don't understand, I don't know. Do we need to worry about them? Like, I don't know. It's a longer conversation. We should probably wrap up because I'm sure you may be able to hear my children behind me. But Charles, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I feel like we could talk for another couple hours. To those that are listening, watching, and folks that are watching this later, when I put it up it'll be on Instagram, of course, but also on YouTube. We have, amazing Charles art from Starseeds up on the website now. Go check it out. From my perspective, one of the best ways that you can support artists is, well, buy their beautiful books, but also their original art is a selfish way of supporting artists, meaning that you get to have a really beautiful thing to put up on your wall. And at Athenaeum, you know that your money, the vast majority of your money, is going to the artists and helping them continue to do what they love the most, I hope, for the most part. Go pick up Starseeds, Fantagraphics, or your local indie comic shop. Follow Charles on Instagram. And are there any books coming out soon, Charles? So we have the Comic-Con exhibit that you should go see if you're in San Diego, for sure. But is there anything else you want to plug before we jump off?
The next story. It should be coming out by the end of summer. I still have some pages to ink. Let's see. These, I'm hoping that when the story is out, we can drop these. Let's see.
And is it going to be volume 4, or are you beautiful?
It's going to be something completely
different.
New.
Okay.
But it's within the Starseeds kind of story. It's going to be called Into the Noosphere.
Okay.
And there won't be any mention about Starseeds until like the 3rd volume of that story where I'm gonna combine the two narratives that are going parallel to each other, and this should be out by the. I'd love to have it out by Comic-Con, but I'm moving at a snail pace. Usually I do the work digitally, but I've decided to do it by hand, and it's going to be the first comic book that's going to be 120 pages, all done by hand. Well, actually, the first comic that was done by hand was this one. And I have 8 pages to ink, and the whole book to letter and write. So if I get it done by the mid-June, by the end of June, I can probably have some copies by Comic-Con. And the idea is to do a presentation at the Comic-Con and Comic-Con Museum, and it should be out hopefully by the summer. And
it's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up. And so it's the story about Arco and Iris and Hadron arriving at the noosphere and why they're there. Right, and what happens after, what it is that they have to do.
Are you self-publishing this, or is this going through a publisher?
I was speaking to Strangers.
Okay, that'd be good. Yeah.
And Eddie is into it. I haven't spoken to him yet. I was supposed to have this done by end of May. So I have to talk to him because he's adamant, and I completely understand and agree. It's like if it's not done, then 80% done, then it shouldn't be promoted to his Kickstarter. So I have to just fess up. It's like, dude, I'm not done. This is as far as I'm at. So if you want it, let's do it. If you don't, then I'll keep working on it. And if it doesn't go through him, then I will just have a couple. I would just do like a short 50 copy print run to have
a rare opportunity there. One of 50. I'll have to grab one if you go that route. I'm really excited for it.
120 black and white pages. So I think it's going to be I don't know yet, to be honest. I want other things, and I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say this. So there's so many different possibilities. So I could self-publish it. I could also. The hope is do it with Strangers, but I'm lagging. So if he's not into it, that's fine. I agree and support his decision. But then I could also just fall back on Fantagraphics if they would have me, and maybe do these as single issues.
Yeah.
Right. Do 32 page, 6 32 page. I think 6 32 page issue comics. And that would be how I would maybe present this comic format.
Yeah.
So it would be like every month it would be 32 pages. And maybe that would be an easier read, because you read a chapter installment of 32 pages, and then you ponder that, and you get the other story, the other issue. But these are things I'm still trying to figure out. And I love Fantagraphics, and the reason I went towards self-publishing with Eddie is just because I make more money.
Right.
That's the only thing, and because it's kind of like working with Eddie is kind of like me self-publishing it, but I'm doing it through him. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm talk to him. I gotta talk to Eddie to see.
Well, we're excited to read it, whatever form it turns out into. I have gotten into floppies, especially in indie comics. I think floppies are really fun. It reminds me of being a kid. It gives me this like nostalgic hit of energy. But however you do it, I will read it, and we will read it, and it's going to be great. Yeah, so we'll wrap it up. Again, art's available. Check out Charles's books, and we'll probably do this again in the future. So thank you, Charles.
Thank you,
It's
John.
been a pleasure chatting with you.
It's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Cheers.